I still hear it sometimes, that deep rumble under my feet, like the city breathing through steel and darkness. That night, the subway station was packed, loud and normal. People staring at phones. Music leaking from cheap earphones. A kid crying somewhere behind me. The air smelled like wet coats and metal. And then 1 second changed everything. I was standing near the yellow line, not crossing it, just close enough to feel the wind when trains fly in. I was tired. Long day. I kept rubbing my neck, thinking about nothing important. Then I felt a hand on my back. Not a bump, not an accident. A firm palm, a sudden force, and my whole world tilted forward. For a split second, my brain refused to understand what was happening. My shoe scraped the edge. My arm shot out, grabbing at air. My stomach dropped like I'd stepped off a cliff. I fell. I remember the lights above me stretching into long lines. I remember the sound that came out of my mouth, something between a gasp and a shout. And I remember one thing clearly. As I went down, I turned my head, and I saw the face. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't shocked. He was calm, almost satisfied. My in-law, my own family by marriage, standing there like he'd been waiting for this moment. That image burned into me even more than the fear. My fingers hit the rough edge of the platform. The concrete scraped my palms. Pain shot through my wrists as I clung on like my life depended on it. Because it did. I looked down into the dark. The tracks weren't just down there. They were right there, close enough to smell the cold metal, close enough to feel the vibration of something coming. And then the sound grew louder. The train. People screamed. Shoes shuffled. Someone dropped a bag. I heard a woman shout, "Oh my God!" My arms shook. I couldn't pull myself up. My elbows were slipping. And then hands grabbed my jacket from above. 2 strangers. Maybe 3. I didn't even see their faces clearly. I just felt the strong pull of people who didn't know me, but refused to let me disappear. They yanked me up hard. I rolled onto the platform, coughing, shaking, staring at my hands like they belonged to someone else. The train rushed in seconds later, wind slamming into my body, roaring past the place where I had just been. If those hands hadn't grabbed me. No, I don't even like finishing that thought. I sat there, stunned, surrounded by strangers asking if I was okay. But my eyes weren't on them. My eyes were scanning the crowd, looking for the man who pushed me. And he was already gone, just like that, as if he'd only come to do one thing and then vanish. That's when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't random. This was personal. And if I didn't find out why, I might not get another chance. My name is Cameron. I'm not a perfect man, but I've always tried to live straight. Work hard, stay honest, keep my head down. When I married Eileen, I thought I was stepping into peace. She was warm, gentle, the kind of person who apologizes when someone else bumps into her. We met when I was building my career in a logistics company. She worked in an office nearby. We started with coffee, then long walks, then serious plans. Her family had money, not just comfortable money, real money. Her father owned property. Her mother was a kind of woman who never raised her voice, but somehow controlled a room with one look. And then there was her brother, Arif. Arif was older than Eileen by 3 years. Tall, sharp smile, always dressed like he was about to walk into a meeting with cameras. Everyone in the family acted like he was a prince. He's smart, they'd say. He's a businessman. He thinks ahead. But from day one, I felt something cold behind his eyes when he looked at me. Not hate, exactly. More like a quiet disrespect. Like I was a guest who stayed too long. At first, I tried to win him over. I offered help. I listened. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I even backed off when he interrupted me mid-sentence. But Arif always found ways to remind me I was less. When we'd sit for dinner, he'd ask innocent-sounding questions. So, Cameron, how much do you earn now? Or worse, do you feel pressure marrying into our family? He'd smile while saying it like it was friendly, but it was never friendly. Eileen noticed sometimes. She'd squeeze my hand under the table like she was saying, "Please, don't react." And because I loved her, I didn't. I told myself Arif was just protective. Or maybe he was insecure. Or maybe it was just his personality. I kept making excuses for him, because that's what you do when you want family to work. And for a while, it did. We visited often. We celebrated birthdays. We smiled in photos. But slowly cracks started showing. Eric began pushing ideas into family conversations, business ideas, investments, opportunities. He'd say things like, "Cameron, you're good with numbers, right? You can help." At first, it sounded respectful, like he wanted to include me. But the more I listened, the more I realized something. He didn't want my help. He wanted my access. At my job, I managed shipping routes and contracts. I had relationships with vendors. I knew how to move things, how to negotiate, who to call. Era started asking questions that felt too specific. What company handles your imports? Who signs those deals? How long are your contracts locked in? I'd answer lightly, not thinking much, until one night, when he leaned close and said quietly, "You know, if you're part of this family, you should bring something valuable to it." That sentence stuck to me. I laughed it off in the moment, but inside I felt something twist, because I realized Arif didn't see me as a man married to his sister. He saw me as a tool. And tools are only respected until they're no longer useful. Still, I never imagined he could go as far as he did. I never imagined he could look at me on a subway platform and decide I shouldn't exist anymore. After the subway incident, I didn't tell anyone the full truth right away. When Eileen arrived at the hospital, her eyes were red, her hands shaking. "What happened?" she kept repeating. "Cameron, what happened?" I told her. Someone pushed me. It was chaos. That part was true. But I didn't say it was your brother. Not yet, because saying it out loud would make it real. And once it was real, nothing could go back. Doctors checked me. Bruises, scrapes, a sore shoulder. But I was alive. That night at home, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. The skin was raw from the concrete. The pain was sharp, but the fear was sharper. Eileen kept pacing, hugging herself. "I swear, the city is getting worse," she said. "People are crazy. You could have..." She didn't finish. I wanted to tell her the truth, but I couldn't. Not because I didn't trust her, because I didn't trust what would happen next. Families don't handle accusations well. They deny. They defend. They twist. And Arif was the golden one. So instead of accusing, I started watching. In the days that followed, Arif called me. His voice sounded concerned. "Hey, brother," he said. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" Brother. The word made my stomach turn. "I'm fine," I replied carefully. "Thank God," he said, but his tone was empty, like he was reading lines. "You know, these stations are dangerous. You should be more careful." More careful, as if I'd tripped, as if I'd chosen it. Then he added, softly, "Anyway, since you're resting, maybe you can think about that business plan I mentioned. Families should move together, you know?" That's when my skin went cold, because to him, my near-death moment was just an interruption, a delay. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. Then the second sign came. A vendor from my work called me and said, "Cameron, someone claiming to be your partner asked for contract details." I froze. "What name?" He paused. "Arif." My heart started pounding so hard I felt in my throat. I told the vendor, "Do not share anything, not one detail, not without written approval from my company." After I ended the call, I realized the truth was bigger than one push. Arif wasn't just trying to scare me. He was trying to take something. Maybe my career, maybe my reputation, maybe my access, maybe my place. I started remembering small moments I'd ignored. The way Arif would look at Eileen and say, "You deserve the best." The way he'd joke that I was lucky she didn't marry a richer man. The way he'd always bring up money, status, influence. And then a memory hit me like a slap. 2 months before the subway incident, I had refused him. He wanted me to share internal vendor lists and shipping schedules. He said it was for a family project. I told him no. I said, I can't risk my job. It's not worth it. He smiled like he understood, but his eyes didn't smile. His eyes promised something. Back then, I thought he was just annoyed. Now I understood. He wasn't annoyed. He was offended. And in Arif's mind, someone who says no to him is someone who needs to be removed. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to accuse him without proof. I wasn't going to explode and give him a chance to play victim. If he wanted to act like I was nothing, I would let him, for now, because I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing, and I had one question burning in my mind every night. If he pushed me once, what would stop him from trying again? A week after the incident, there was a family dinner. Eileen insisted we go. Everyone is worried, she said. They want to see you. I didn't want to. My body still ached, and my mind was worse than my body. But I knew something. If Arif had done it, he would want to see my face, to confirm I was still breathing, to measure how broken I was. So I went. The house looked the same as always. Expensive lights, polished floors, food laid out like a celebration. Her parents hugged me, asked how I felt. Then Arif walked in. He smiled wide. He opened his arms like we were best friends. There he is, he announced. My guy, the strongest man in the city. People laughed, and I forced a smile. He hugged me, patting my back with just enough pressure to remind me his hand had been there before. In my ear, he whispered, I'm glad you're okay. Then, even softer, almost like a breath, you got lucky. My stomach twisted. I stepped back and looked at him. His face stayed friendly, like he'd said nothing. All through dinner, he performed, joked, complimented the food, told stories. And every time someone looked away, he'd glance at me like a man watching a locked door. He wasn't afraid. He was curious. He wanted to know how much I remembered. Eileen sat beside me, unaware of the war happening under the table. At one point, Arif raised his glass. To family, he said, and to Cameron. Life is short. We should appreciate each other. Everyone clinked glasses. I watched the way his eyes stayed on me when he said, life is short. After dinner, while others talked in the living room, Arif pulled me aside to the hallway. He leaned against the wall, casually, like this was just brother talk. You look stressed, he said. I'm fine, I replied. He nodded slowly. Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe you should step back from work for a while. Focus on health. I stared at him. Why? He shrugged. Because accidents happen. Stress makes you careless. There was again. Careless. Like my survival was annoying him. Then he said, also, I heard your company might promote you soon. My chest tightened. I hadn't told anyone. Not even Eileen. It was still confidential. I forced myself to breathe calmly. Who told you that? He smiled. People talk. No, people don't talk about private company decisions. Not unless someone is digging. And Arif was digging. He leaned closer. If you get promoted, you'll have even more access, right? Bigger contacts, bigger deals. I didn't answer. He continued. Imagine what our family could build together. If you stopped thinking like an employee and started thinking like family. That was the moment my fear turned into something else. Anger. Because this wasn't just jealousy. It was greed with a mask. He wanted me to break rules for him. And if I refused, he wanted to break me. I kept my voice calm. I won't risk my job. Arif's smile held for half a second, then cracked. His eyes hardened, and he said the most chilling thing in a soft voice. Cameron, you should be careful how you say no to people who care about you. Then he smiled again, like he'd never said it, and walked back into the room. I stood there, frozen, because I finally understood the full truth. The push wasn't a random crime. It was a message, a warning, and Arif wasn't done. That night, as we drove home, Eileen asked, why were you quiet? I looked at the road ahead and said, just tired. But inside I was thinking, if I tell her now, She might run to her parents. They might confront him. He'll deny it. He'll call me unstable. He'll twist it into me attacking the family. Arif didn't just push people physically. He pushed narratives. He pushed blame. He pushed people into corners until they broke. So I made another decision. I would not confront him emotionally. I would confront him with something stronger than anger. Proof. And I knew exactly where to start. That subway station had cameras. And if the world had seen what my eyes saw, Arif's smile would finally disappear. The next morning, I went back to the station, alone. Just stepping onto the platform made my throat tighten. I stood far from the edge, heart racing like the train was already coming. I watched people walk past me, laughing, texting, living like nothing had happened. I wanted to scream, "Do you know how close I came?" But I stayed quiet, because this wasn't about fear anymore. This was about control. I spoke to the station office and asked about security footage. The worker looked bored. "We don't just give that out," he said. "You need a police report." I expected that, so I filed one. Not the full story, just that I was pushed, and I needed footage for investigation. Then I did something Arif never expected. I didn't rush. I didn't rant. I didn't storm into family meetings. I became patient. I became calm. I became the version of myself that scares people like him the most, the version that thinks. I started writing down every detail. I remembered time, platform number, the direction of the train, what Arif was wearing. I remembered his jacket, dark, with a shiny zipper. I remembered his watch catching the light. Then I reached out quietly to the two strangers who saved me. One of them had left his number with the station staff in case I needed a statement. His name was Murad. We met at a small cafe. He was a normal guy, tired eyes, honest voice. He said, "I saw you go down, but I also saw the guy behind you. He pushed you. It wasn't an accident." My hands trembled around my cup. "Could you recognize him?" Murad nodded slowly. "Yes, I can't forget that face." That was my first real piece of light in a dark tunnel. Then came the second. A woman who had been waiting nearby also agreed to speak. She said she heard a man whisper something right before the push, like he was talking to himself. "What did you hear?" I asked. She frowned. Something like, "Now you'll learn." "I'm not sure." "Now you'll learn." That sounded exactly like Arif. I kept building the puzzle. But the biggest piece was still the video. Days passed. Arif kept calling, acting friendly. "How's work? You sleeping okay? You sure you're not traumatized?" Each question sounded like concern anyone else. To me, it sounded like he was checking if I remembered. I played my part. "I'm okay," I told him, just focusing on healing. He sounded relieved. "Good, good." Then he added, "We should meet soon. Just you and me, talk about the future." I said, "Sure." Because the truth is, I wanted him close. I wanted him comfortable. I wanted him careless. Finally, the police investigator contacted me. "We got the footage request," he said. "Come in tomorrow." That night, I barely slept. When I arrived, the investigator played the video. And there it was, my body on the platform, the crowd, the moment, Arif walking behind me, his hand rising, his push, then him stepping back, blending into the crowd like smoke. The investigator paused on his face. "Do you know him?" he asked. My mouth was dry. My voice came out low. "Yes." He raised an eyebrow. "Who is he?" I stared at the screen, watching the moment my life almost ended, and I said the words I had been afraid to speak. "My wife's brother." The investigator's expression changed. Not shocked, just serious. "Okay," he said. "This is no longer a random assault. This is targeted." Targeted. That word hit me, because it meant my fear was real. But it also meant something else. Arif wasn't just evil. He was foolish, because he did it in a place full of cameras, in a world full of people. And now, I had him, but I still wasn't satisfied. A video could show the action. It couldn't show the motive, and motive is where monsters hide. So I planned something risky, something quiet. Something that would make Arif expose himself with his own mouth. I wasn't going to destroy him with fists. I was going to destroy him with truth. The next morning, I went back to the station, alone. Just stepping onto the platform made my throat tighten. I stood far from the edge, heart racing like the train was already coming. I watched people walk past me, laughing, texting, living like nothing had happened. I wanted to scream, "Do you know how close I came?" But I stayed quiet, because this wasn't about fear anymore. This was about control. I spoke to the station office and asked about security footage. The worker looked bored. "We don't just give that out," he said. "You need a police report." I expected that, so I filed one. Not the full story, just that I was pushed, and I needed footage for investigation. Then I did something Arif never expected. I didn't rush. I didn't rant. I didn't storm into family meetings. I became patient. I became calm. I became the version of myself that scares people like him the most, the version that thinks. I started writing down every detail. I remembered time, platform number, the direction of the train, what Arif was wearing. I remembered his jacket, dark, with a shiny zipper. I remembered his watch catching the light. Then I reached out quietly to the two strangers who saved me. One of them had left his number with the station staff in case I needed a statement. His name was Murad. We met at a small cafe. He was a normal guy, tired eyes, honest voice. He said, "I saw you go down, but I also saw the guy behind you. He pushed you. It wasn't an accident." My hands trembled around my cup. "Could you recognize him?" Murad nodded slowly. "Yes, I can't forget that face." That was my first real piece of light in a dark tunnel. Then came the second. A woman who had been waiting nearby also agreed to speak. She said she heard a man whisper something right before the push, like he was talking to himself. "What did you hear?" I asked. She frowned. Something like, "Now you'll learn." "I'm not sure." "Now you'll learn." That sounded exactly like Arif. I kept building the puzzle. But the biggest piece was still the video. Days passed. Arif kept calling, acting friendly. "How's work? You sleeping okay? You sure you're not traumatized?" Each question sounded like concern anyone else. To me, it sounded like he was checking if I remembered. I played my part. "I'm okay," I told him, just focusing on healing. He sounded relieved. "Good, good." Then he added, "We should meet soon. Just you and me, talk about the future." I said, "Sure." Because the truth is, I wanted him close. I wanted him comfortable. I wanted him careless. Finally, the police investigator contacted me. "We got the footage request," he said. "Come in tomorrow." That night, I barely slept. When I arrived, the investigator played the video. And there it was, my body on the platform, the crowd, the moment, Arif walking behind me, his hand rising, his push, then him stepping back, blending into the crowd like smoke. The investigator paused on his face. "Do you know him?" he asked. My mouth was dry. My voice came out low. "Yes." He raised an eyebrow. "Who is he?" I stared at the screen, watching the moment my life almost ended, and I said the words I had been afraid to speak. "My wife's brother." The investigator's expression changed. Not shocked, just serious. "Okay," he said. "This is no longer a random assault. This is targeted." Targeted. That word hit me, because it meant my fear was real. But it also meant something else. Arif wasn't just evil. He was foolish, because he did it in a place full of cameras, in a world full of people. And now, I had him, but I still wasn't satisfied. A video could show the action. It couldn't show the motive, and motive is where monsters hide. So I planned something risky, something quiet, something that would make Arif expose himself with his own mouth. I wasn't going to destroy him with fists. I was going to destroy him with truth. I didn't tell Eileen right away, not because I wanted to hurt her, because I wanted to protect her from being used. Arif would twist anything she said, any emotion she showed. So I waited until I had everything ready, lawyer, evidence, statements. Then I sat her down at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten simple dinners and talked about future kids. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. "Eileen," I said softly, "I need you to listen, and I need you to believe me." Her face tightened. "What is it?" I took out my phone and played the station footage. At first, she didn't understand what she was seeing. Then she saw the push. Then she saw the face. Her eyes widened like her brain refused to accept it. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be." I paused the video on Arif's face. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Then I played the audio from the restaurant. Arif's voice filled the room, calm and cold. "I only remove problems." Eileen covered her mouth with both hands. Tears fell instantly. "Why would he do this?" she choked out. I didn't answer right away, because the answer was ugly. But I said it anyway, because I said no to him, because he wanted access, because he thought I was in his way. Eileen shook her head, crying harder. "He's my brother." "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "And you're my wife. That's why this hurts me too." For a moment, I thought she might defend him, but she didn't. She looked at me through tears and said, "What do we do?" That was when I knew I married the right woman. We didn't scream. We didn't run to the family in panic. We did it the right way. We called her parents and asked them to come over. Just them. When they arrived, they were confused, annoyed, already defensive. "What is this about?" her father asked. Eileen's hands shook as she played the video. Her mother went pale. Her father stared at the screen like it was fake. He stood up slowly. This is edited." I looked at him. "It's from the police file." Then I played the audio. Silence filled the room. Her mother sat down hard, like her legs gave up. Her father's jaw tightened. Arif would never. Eileen stood up, tears in her eyes, and said something I'll never forget. "Dad, you're not listening because you don't want to, but this is him." Her father's face turned red with rage, not at Arif at first, but at the shame, because he knew the truth meant his family image was about to collapse. And that's when Arif walked in. He had keys. He always had keys. He entered like a king, smiling. "What's going on?" he asked. Nobody answered. I turned my phone toward him and pressed play. He watched himself push me. His smile faded, just a little. He tried to laugh. "That's not." I paused on his face. "That's you." Then I played the audio. His own voice filled the room again. "I only remove problems." For the first time, Arif looked uncertain. He glanced at his parents, searching for rescue. But his mother was crying, and his father looked like a man seeing a stranger wearing his son's skin. Arif's voice turned sharp. "You set me up." I stepped forward. "You pushed me on the tracks." He lifted his hands. "Prove it." I pointed at the screen. "I did." He snapped, "That could be anyone." Murad, the witness, was standing in our doorway. My lawyer had asked him to come. Murad looked Arif dead in the face and said, "It was you?" I saw it. Arif's shoulders stiffened. He turned back to me, eyes full of hate now, no more mask. "You think you're smart?" he hissed. "You think you can ruin me?" That's when the doorbell rang. 2 officers stepped in. Arif's head turned slowly. His face went blank, because while he was busy threatening me, the consequences had already arrived. The officers asked him to stand and turn around. Arif tried to speak, but his voice cracked. His father shouted, "Arif, what did you do?" Eileen sobbed. Arif looked at me one last time. Pure rage, pure shock, like he couldn't believe the tool had become the judge. As they let him out, he whispered something to me, low and poisonous. "This isn't over." I stared back and whispered, calm, "For you it is." The days after that felt like walking through glass. The family didn't become happy overnight. There was no magic ending, no instant peace. There was grief. Eileen mourned the brother she thought she had. Her mother barely ate for weeks. Her father became a quieter man, like pride had drained out of him. And me? I had nightmares. Not of the tracks, of the face. That calm satisfaction. Because when someone tries to erase you and then goes back to dinner smiling, It changes how you see people. The legal process moved forward, slowly but firmly. The video, the witnesses, the audio, together, they built a wall Arif couldn't talk his way through. He tried. He claimed I was jealous. He claimed I wanted inheritance. He claimed the recording was manipulated. But facts don't cry. Facts don't panic. Facts stand still and wait for lies to collapse on their own. And they did. One day, I sat outside a courtroom and watched Arif walk in wearing a suit, still try to look important. But his eyes were different. Smaller. Tired. He wasn't a king anymore. He was just a man facing what he did. When the decision came, I didn't feel happy. I felt relief. Because justice isn't always a celebration. Sometimes it's just breathing again without fear. Eileen and I went to therapy. Not because we were broken, but because we wanted to survive what happened without it poisoning our future. Her parents apologized to me. Not with grand speeches. Just quiet words and tired eyes. I should have seen it, her father said once. I made excuses because I didn't want shame. I nodded. I understand. But shame doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It grows. That's what Arif never understood. He thought power meant silence. He thought family title meant protection. He thought one push could make a problem vanish. But here's what shocked everyone, even me. I didn't take revenge by ruining him in the streets. I didn't spread rumors. I didn't fight him with fists. I fought him with evidence, with patience, with truth. And truth is the kind of revenge that doesn't stain your hands. It just exposes theirs. Months later, I stood on a different platform in a different station. I stayed far from the edge. Not because I was afraid of trains. Because I finally respected how quickly life can change. Eileen held my hand. She looked up at me and said, "You're still here." I squeezed her hand and said, "Because strangers saved me and because I refuse to stay quiet." And that's the lesson I want you to remember. Sometimes the biggest betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from people who sit at your table, people who smile in photos, people who call you family. So trust your instincts. Document what you can. Stay calm when others want you emotional. And never let someone convince you that speaking the truth is too much. Because silence is where cruelty grows. And the moment you choose truth, that's the moment your life stops being their game and becomes yours again.